So Quentin and I moved into our home 12 years ago. In June, it'll actually be 13. And I fell in love with that house looking at it online, and then when we first walked into it, it's probably the first house the two of us looked at together, and we both were in love with it, walking through. And we both said, and that was our agreement, that we would both have to love it in order for us to purchase that house. And so we walked through it, and I just felt it. You know, when you walk in someplace, you say, yes, this is it, this is it. And I also knew at that time that there are things that I wanted to change at some point. But I wanted to live there for a time and see how I was living in it and really see how I felt in each room. That's always important to me, how I feel in my home. And no matter what room it is, whether it's a bathroom, a guest room, the kitchen, I always want a feeling when I'm in my home. So I always kept in my mind what it is I wanted to do, what I wanted to change, and just kind of held it close and never let go of it. And in those almost 13 years, there's been family issues, multiple deaths in the families, business challenges, and life just happens, doesn't it? And you just go through and things just kind of get pushed. And in the midst of it, we get to hold on to those dreams. We get to keep somewhere within us those things that we aspire to or that we're looking toward. And it took a while before I got clear as to the specifics of what I wanted to change and where and what would that look like and what would that feel like. Again, that feeling that I wanted in my home. And so a lot of it was there, but I just kept seeing areas and I would know, okay, there's something I want to do here. Don't know how that's going to get done. Don't know yet where the money's going to come from. Don't know where the people who can execute that will come from. But I stayed the course. And now, with the 13th anniversary coming up of living there, those things are starting to happen. And it's interesting that, you know, when you read, if you're familiar with the law of attraction, you hear things like, act as if. Act as if. Have the feeling now before it ever appears. That you have to be in the same frequency now as you would be in the manifestation. And sometimes that's hard to embrace. But once I got clear, I would do things like run to the window and look outside at the siding on the house and feel excited about how pretty the new siding was before it was even there. Which seemed really silly. And I always did it when I was by myself, so that nobody was there to escort me away in a nice little jacket, jacket like that, and said, okay, it's time for her to go. So I held on to those dreams. I figured out what acting as if looked like and what that would feel like. So when I looked at my floors, I would imagine deep pile carpet in some places so I could do my yoga in the morning and just see pretty expansive floors. Whereas before, when we had cats who were ailing, and you know how old cats get, I vowed there would be no new carpet until we didn't have ailing cats. And so we did that. And then that dream came true. And it's interesting that in unity and in new thought, because things feel woo-woo, that's a word we use a lot, it often feels like there's nothing to grab onto. I think in the faiths that we grow up in, and I was raised Catholic, there was a God out there that I could pray to who I thought was giving and taking, who was judging, who was punishing, who was admonishing, who was deciding who had grace and who did not. And so it was kind of easy, I think, for me to think at some point, oh, God just doesn't want to give me that yet. It's not good for me. Or for some reason, it's just not in God's timing. That's an interesting thing to think about. Timing. Is God ready for me to have that yet? And in unity and with metaphysics, there is no God out there who's dispensing anything. Whether it's grace, goodness, good health, there is only this force. And only is not the best word to use there. There is this force, this presence that is us and that permeates everything, everywhere. And in unity, what we do is remind ourselves that we are part of that energy, that continuum, the dynamics of the universe, and that we only have to call on it to bring what we want into manifestation. I mean, how many of you have seen The Secret? And I watched it again very recently, and one of the criticisms of The Secret was that if we start trying to manifest stuff, that we become enamored with the physical. Just having a new car, pretty house, to have things. But I think in every single situation, even with looking at the new siding on my house when it was actually there, in the times when I was acting as if, even with the new carpet, even with those things, there was a depth of that experience when the manifestation was there, and I was witnessing it with my own eyes, that the stuff did not matter. It didn't matter that it was now a pretty house or a prettier house outside. I had lost that, and all that I felt was the depth of gratitude and connection and being a part of this energy field that is God. I felt it physically, unequivocally. There was a depth of that presence when all of a sudden I said, oh my gosh, here it is. We've talked about this before, but this is important. And as we're studying Discover the Power Within You, Eric Butterworth brings us information and his wisdom to this phenomenon. This is actually from Paul Tillich. A catalyst, he calls, for progressive theological thinking in modern times, referred to God as the, quote, ground of our very being, unquote. In his book, The Shaking of the Foundations, he says, the name of this infinite and inexhaustible depth and ground of all being is God. That depth is what the word God means. And if that word has not much meaning for you, translate it and speak of the depths of your life, of the source of your being, of your ultimate concern, of what you take seriously without reservation. Perhaps in order to do so, you must forget everything traditional that you have learned about God. Perhaps even that word itself. For if you know that God means depth, you know much about him. You cannot then call yourself an atheist or unbeliever, for you cannot think or say, life has no depth. Life is shallow. Being itself is surface only. If you could say this in complete seriousness, you would be an atheist, but otherwise you are not. He who knows about depth knows God. Further down on, this is page 33, he says, Meister Eckhart had this feeling when he said that God expects only one thing of you, and that is that you should stop thinking of yourself as a created being and let God be God in you. So, as we're manifesting, what I've discovered is that you do feel that depth, that connectedness, that sense of this realm that you are a part of. Because if you can call it in, and as you claim it, then you are it. There's not a time when that hasn't happened. And so yes, the stuff as I was acting as if seemed important. But really what became important as I stayed that course was that depth of feeling I had in the presence. Because then the stuff represents potentiality and what's possible. What's there for us if we will only call it in, if we will only say yes to it. But it's a challenge to give up the, please God give me this or that. Because that's all we've ever heard. The song we just listened to, Only Jesus. And the lyric, I don't want to have a legacy. I listened to that and I thought, isn't that interesting? Because Eric Butterworth probably would say that yes, we want to have a legacy. And that legacy doesn't become something that becomes heady for us, because when you step into it in the right spirit, you become like Jesus manifest. You become for other people that spirit that Jesus was as he walked the earth. Your legacy is not about something that is about conceit or high-handedness or this power that's the kind of power the world only appreciates. It becomes something deeper. And yes, it's hard to wrap our heads around that. And again, I know I've said these words again on a Sunday. Perhaps it's not for us to wrap our head around it. Because the mind can only go so deep, I think, around those concepts. I think we have to meet it with the spirit that we are, with our hearts fully open. And the more we're willing to go deep, I think the more we become masters at manifesting whatever it is. And what we principally will manifest is being the Christ. Being that divinity, expressing that divinity out loud here in this world, as within, so without. And that as within is a deep well, deeper than we can fathom. But in it, all of our dreams live. And in those dreams, we get to experience God. And the depth of being with a capital B. When I try to think about it, it doesn't work. I don't think there's a mental comprehension for God and the depth of the presence. Sometimes there are no words. There's no mental construct for that. And so being willing to leave the mental need for comprehension, that human need for comprehension, to know the why and the how, I think we just go spirit to spirit and let it come through us. Just in the last couple of days, Friday, I was going to Carol's exercise class at 8:30 in the morning. And as I was stretching, preparing for that class, my back started to hurt. And I wanted to go to her class. I had just texted her and said, I'm going, I'll see you at 8:30. And my back hurt so badly, I didn't want to walk around. I mean, I could barely walk down the hall. And I said, well, if this is going to happen, there's a part of me that in true potentiality can go to that class and exercise, and I can heal myself and do this and enjoy that and be there. And so I started talking to myself and calling on divine health and calling on peace and talking to my body, telling it that I am, the divine in me has dominion over the physical of me. And I went, and I still hurt walking from the car into the gym. I still hurt going up the stairs to the class, and I could not work out at my usual 100%, but I still worked out. And I listened to my body, because my body was telling me at some point to go sit down and stretch, and so I went and took a break, stretched, sat for 2 songs, and then went back and was able to finish. And somewhere around 12 noon, I realized the pain was gone. And I hadn't thought about it. I didn't say another thing to my body. The conversation stopped. Remember we were talking about last week? Just shut up. I had already affirmed what I wanted to affirm. And then I just went on. And I said, thank you. And then it was gone. This morning I was feeling something else, and it seemed to only intensify as I was driving over here. And so again, talked to my body. And I said, we have a job to do today, and we are going to do it. And whatever message you're trying to give me, I will receive it. Whatever I need to let go of right now, I'm willing to let go of it. But I want to let go of it easily and quietly. And somewhere around 30 minutes later, I felt the peace in my body. And yes, the physical peace that I felt was huge, because I could take a breath and I thought, oh my gosh, this worked. But really what I felt was the depth of my connection to all of this.
Yeah.
Really what I thought was, oh my gosh, here we are again. I've talked about this before, but this is the depth we have to go for if we're going to experience God. If we're going to really live these unity principles, because they take you into depth. They call you into something other than this superficial knowledge of something out there. Something to lay your hopes on. Something to lay your blame on. And Jesus has always said in his teachings, you have this power. Ask and it is given. Knock and the door is opened. So depth is God. And if we're truly going to know God, I think we have to go deep. We got to let go of all the strings we had and all the things that we held on to before and just be willing to go there whenever something presents itself to you. It's easy to run back and go back to what we were taught growing up. And there's a whole lot more accountability for self having to work this out when you embrace unity principles. Because it puts it squarely on your shoulders, but as a divine being, there is no pressure. Because not only do you have the power, you are the power. And so as you hit a struggle, as you hit something else that knocks you to your knees, or tightens in your back, or grips your brain like a headache, like I often talk about, if my knees start to hurt, I remind myself of who I am, what I am. In the depths of my despair, I remind myself of what I am. And that in that moment, in the middle of the struggle, yes, you are still God in expression. Especially in that moment, you are God in expression and called to be God in that moment. Especially in that moment. Because it's easy when the going is smooth. So yes, I'm in my divinity. Right? And you're in the dance and it's all cool and everything's just going smoothly. But man, it's, when stuff hits you, we still have to be able to say, yes, I'm in my divinity. And get it back somehow. Here we go back to the toolkit that helps you raise your vibration. Depth. God as depth. Depth as God. Seeing ourselves, our being, our lives, our existence, our struggles as deep. As moment by moment callings to our greatness. And it doesn't mean that we are saying we are the same as God, that we are that omnipresence even though we are in potentiality. It doesn't mean all of a sudden we've gotten big-headed and say, well, I'm all that. And a bag of chips. Like one of my cousin's sons says, and fried chicken on a Friday night. When you think you're better than everybody and have all the answers, it's not about that. Because I think every time I've been in that depth, every time there's been a manifestation, I am humbled beyond belief. And you'd think that's a dichotomy, that you can feel powerful and humbled at the same time. But that again is the death. I think when you feel that overwhelming power and humility at the same time, then that's when you're at the greatest expression, perhaps, of God. That's when I fall to my knees and I can't contain it. The skin can't contain it. It's bigger than this. So go deep. Go deep. Courageously. Unabashedly. All the time. No matter what. Because you are the power.